never thought that I would be the one who turned you down and you disagree. We've been on and off, you were never mine to keep. So many times that I have cried when you left me without even saying goodbye. I was longing for you to say you love me back. Yes, I fell in love with you and tried my best to make you love me. And now that you say you want me, oh, my answer's no. Yes, I fell in love with you and tried my best to make you love me. And now that you say you want me, oh, my answer's no. I never thought that I would be the one who turned you down and you disagree. We've been on and off, you were never mine to keep. Times that I have cried when you left me without even saying goodbye. I was longing for you to say you love me back. Yes, I fell in love with you and tried my best to make you love me. And now that you say you want me, oh, my answer's no.
Hey Jeff, good evening. Oh, look at that.
How you doing, Jerry?
I'm good.
Yeah,
um, yeah, yet another Friday, another 7 o'clock.
yeah,
Week in the weekend review. So,
yeah.
how have you been this week?
Good, good. Yeah, it's not much to do other than do the podcast because it's been raining, right? And we had some crazy weather around here, so not a whole lot of riding outside.
No, exactly. And the heat is building, and then the crazy weather comes. So, um, I was doing my Thursday evening ride yesterday, and right before the lap number 5, the hammer lap, where I was going to go full gas, the power went out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. So you didn't notice that?
No,
No,
not at our house.
obviously. Yeah. So that no, it's for 5 minutes or something. Everything
Oh, well.
went out, and then after 5 minutes, it automatically kicked back in. So
Hmm.
um, I wasn't I wasn't able to do that. So that yeah, that was unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And our neighborhood's kind of it's unique in that all of our power lines are underground.
Hmm.
So we're one of the few neighborhoods that doesn't lose power. Downingtown, I know, was out. Traffic lights will be out, but we usually have power. So I'm surprised
Right.
that you lost it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely, and that's even with the previous week where many people had power outages. My colleagues, and they live in the Phoenixville area, so the all in the area, and a lot of people had power outages, and a lot of that's what I saw on Strava, for example, that people going out on to bike, they basically had to reroute because you had so many trees down and power cables, so it was a big mess in this area. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Springtime in Pennsylvania.
yeah, exactly. It starts with a
Yeah,
bang.
yeah.
So yeah. Um, Yeah, a couple of things that we have to discuss. I want to try something new, so um, I'll switch to my other screen, and it would be nice to talk about the dirty cancel. So we spoke about that for 2 weeks in a row, and so last Saturday, the it was D-Day. So many people went out and did a 200-mile ride. So that was interesting to see. So I captured um, some data on that, and I need to go in presentation mode. Yes. So obviously the first person was Lawrence Van Dam himself. So
Nice.
he completed. I don't know. So it says 199.63. I guess it's maybe he had a deflating tire or something. But I suppose he did the 200 miles. But you see 11 hours 45 minutes, an average of 17 miles an hour, and 2,400 feet of climbing, which is in the Netherlands. That's easily a lot.
Yeah,
So
right.
you see how much you have to ride to get. We can do this over here in our area within an hour, right?
Right.
2,400 feet. So that's a nice thing. But so you wouldn't you tell from just the average speed, but they really basically raced the complete 200 miles. So pulling hard, and so that was interesting. He rode with Nicky Terpstra and somebody else. So I have Nicky Terpstra's data also.
Hmm.
He's still a pro. So that's pretty cool. And then interesting, you have Robert Geesink here down to the left, and I have to look to my left. Nobody's seeing me, so that's actually okay. So he did 201 miles, and he's down in Spain. I think he's near Girona in Spain. Yeah, you see on the over here, La Scala. I've been
Hmm.
there. We've been there a couple of times. Beautiful area. Really
Nice.
nice for mountain biking, by the way. And that's near Girona. So he did um, 200 miles, did a little bit longer. So if you compare that with Nicky Terpstra, 11 hour 45, right? But if you look at this elevation, it's slightly different. So, right, he did 200 miles, did the same average speed, but instead of 2,400 feet, he did 10,000 feet. So he had a little bit more climbing during
Wow.
that day. So that's pretty cool. He had a great training ride. So and then we have Nicky Terpstra, and he put in some photos. So if you have Strava, it's fun to look at. Basically, they captured their day with some photos, and he rode together with Laurens ten Dam and Ivar Schlick, who is I think he's a mountain biker and European champ on the road or on the no on the beach. So he's the European champ beach racing. That's
Okay.
a specific discipline. Maybe we can spend some time on that in another show.
Yeah.
And then you had Wout van Aert from the Jumbo team.
Mhm.
He also did the Dirty Kanza. He doesn't have his activities public, but I have to assume that the 200 miles that you see over here is the Dirty cancelled ride.
Nice.
And kind of a special mention is Annemiek van Vleuten, the current world champ on the road. She's an absolute training beast. She trains a lot and a lot of mileage, and so she didn't do the dirty cancelled, but she went out with her neighbor, and they rode 248 miles.
Wow.
And I did that in 11 hours 13 minutes, so with an average
Ooh.
speed of 22.1 miles. So I think that's a nice effort.
Yeah, that's quicker. Yeah.
200 right, 248 miles, close to 250 miles, with an average speed of 22.1 miles. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then there's actually somebody, and you pointed that out, Mr. Ted King over here in the U.S., who thought, okay, let me also do a ride. So he did 310 miles in 20 hours, but look at the elevation,
Yeah.
right? 30,400, 600 feet, 4,600 feet. So that's crazy. He got a couple of KOMs, King of the Mountains, along the way, but yeah, that's really really impressive. So it's
Yeah.
310 miles.
And look at his suffer score. So typically in a mountain bike race, I'll do 200, 220 suffer score,
Uh-huh.
and his what's his 1,300 and something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
After.
Yeah, he got six KOMs along the way.
Yeah.
Most of them on climbs. He started at 11 at night, so he starts in the dark.
Oh.
It rained for like the first 5 hours, and he's getting KOMs
Yeah.
in the rain, in the dark, you know,
Yeah.
on gravel.
Yeah.
It's insane, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, his route went from the northern tip of Vermont to the southern tip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That is a beautiful area, and
yeah,
and a decent amount of climbing, obviously. Yeah, so that's amazing. So these pro riders, ex-pro riders, um, with basically no racing going on, setting goals and
yeah,
organizing these monster rides. It's great to see, and really impressive, right? If you none of these rides is below 10, 11 hours,
right.
11 hours sitting on the bike, and it is interesting. Obviously, um, Lawrence and them, he did the podcast about it, and I haven't listened it completely to it, but the beginning part, he said actually felt great. The next day he was dehydrated, he was tired, he had muscle aches everywhere, but he recovered pretty quickly. And he said, yeah, that's actually doing 200 miles just changes your overall stamina and endurance so much that the next rides were so much more easier, according to him. So
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting take on that. And he said the same for Robert Geesing. So he said a couple of days after Robert Geesing did those 200 miles, he went out for a shorter but very, very hard ride. And he basically took 5 or 6 of his, let's say, long-lasting records, looking at a 5 minute, 5 minute and 500 watts average power, and a number of those records that he improved just a couple of days after this monster effort of 200 miles. So I guess lessons learned here are we need to do a 200-mile ride, Geoff. So yeah. So, but that's interesting. It's pretty cool for these guys to go out and do those rides. And
Right.
if I recall correctly, you were planning for 100-mile. I'm not sure if I should.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So on Sunday we planned for a 100-mile mountain bike ride. It was going to be starting right on the Maryland-Pennsylvania border.
Yeah.
My friend Jason Samini, who lives down there, there was 4 of us that or 5 of us, sorry, that started. His 15-year-old son was one of them, and he said he's just going to do probably 30 or 40 miles, and then you know, call it a day because he's so young.
Yeah.
And then my buddy Jacob, who has only been riding for about a year, but he was a pro motocross racer.
Oh, okay.
He wanted to come out and try it, but he was working. He has his own company. He was working till 10 that night. So he ate a Philly cheesesteak at 10 at night, you know. And he's like, I'm still coming out. And I'm like, probably want to turn back early. So we were planning to start at 8 in the morning, but I was like, can we push it up a little? Like, can we go to like 7? So we agreed on 7:30. We had a late start. There were some flat tires and things, and by mile 46, I was like, yeah, I should probably start heading back. So I thought the young kid, the 15-year-old, and Jacob, the new guy, was going to turn back with me, but they were like, no, we're going to go for a little while longer.
Yeah.
Well, 7 o'clock that night, I get a call. They're like, we're just finishing up the ride.
Oh, really? So there was
So they
from
all did
8 or 9 in the morning to 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was an all-day event, and they had to come in and get food and go get more water and go back out. And I mean, they kept at it and got the whole 100 in.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. 100 miles is 100 miles, and we're going to complete it. So okay, it's a day well spent, right? If you have the time to do it and you have to that goal. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
I'm happy for both for all of them, but especially Jason's son, the 15-year-old. He'd never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
And Jacob, who's so new to cycling, you know, it's cool to see him complete something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me see where to. So if you kind of look at our weeks and the things that happened, let me go and talk a little bit about the podcast that we released and the 2 other podcasts that we recorded, because we're always very proud and very excited to have these amazing guests on the podcast. So we released the podcast with Rich, who you see over here on the left. Obviously, we encourage everybody to listen, but we kind of spoke a little bit to that last week also. But really great podcast. I think it's an hour 15, so a little bit longer than we normal do. But that's because there's so much great content in that in that podcast, we talk about his career, where he came from. Super interesting. He started with BMX, basically followed in the, let's say, following his big brother, and then starting with XC mountain bike racing, and then in enduro racing. I got to ride for Pivot, the factory team. We talked about his YouTube channel, the technique. We called the podcast "Finding the Fulcrum" because he talks about that. So he's a very animated, very articulate talker. A great
Yeah.
podcast.
Right. Yeah, his channel's great. If anyone is interested in learning some of the techniques for mountain biking, I suggest it. He's really good about breaking things down to simple to understand pieces.
Right. And then that Sunday, I actually had an interview with Jasper Verkuil here in the right bottom. So while you were still mountain biking, I spoke with Jasper, and so Jasper is very interesting because he also has his own YouTube channel, and coincidentally, he also started with BMX racing. And following in the, let's say, in the footsteps of his bigger brother, and he did BMX for until he was 22 or 23. Was in the let's say the national youth teams, and won a couple of titles, and then moved into road racing, basically at a pretty high level, elite level in the Netherlands. And the really interesting thing about Jasper is that he's also a pilot on a Boeing 747. And that basically brings him all over the world. And he talks about that. And whenever he flies over the world, he always tries to do a bike ride and find the local people or interesting races. He does product reviews. And we have our preview is on YouTube. So I'll share the link, but if you go to our channel on YouTube, you will see the preview of the interview with Jasper on there. Also very animated, super cool, super cool dude, and a lot of interesting stuff.
Right. And then our last interview, right, that we did was with Mandy Marquardt.
Margard, yeah.
Margard, yes, which was great. It was very insightful to hear her background, how she got into racing, going back and forth to Germany, and then moving from Florida, racing around the U.S., racing in Germany, coming back to the U.S., and then settling. Going to Penn State, which is a powerhouse for cycling. It's produced some really outstanding riders like Bobby Lee, Mike Friedman. So she went to that school and then settled in that area and became just a track superstar. So we're waiting to hear if she's going to make it into the Olympic team. But the discussion was just really, really top notch. I don't know about you, Gerry. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and to put a couple of things in perspective is that one, she is the current record holder for 2 sprint distances on the track.
Right.
She's an 18-time national champion, and maybe even more important, I'm not sure if that's the correct way of saying it, but at the age of 16 she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes while she was back in Germany, and so she talks a lot about that, how she dealt with that. Basically one of the first things that she heard was you won't ever be able to compete at the level that you do today. And fast forward, she obviously still is, and as you mentioned, has a very good shot at making the Olympic team. So she talks about that, and that's I think, a true inspiration and a role model for boys and girls that are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and furthermore, everyone obviously is that, um, yeah, being competitive, and how do you deal that day in, day out? So that's really interesting. Yes.
Yeah. And it's neat that her team focuses on racers with type 1 diabetes. So she's on the perfect in the perfect situation to do what she needs to do, having a team that's so supportive of that. So it really brings a lot of light into the disease and how to be competitive and under all those circumstances.
Right. Yep. And she also trains at the um, uh, T-Town track, the Valley Preferred Cycling Center. So keep an eye out on that. So Jasper's podcast will be published Wednesday the 10th, and Mandy will be a week after that. So it'll be Wednesday the 17th of June.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me go back here. Here we are again. So yeah, that's with these rainy days, we can spend some time on. And we already have another guest committed to the podcast. And again, we won't spoil too much, but we're talking to a former pro who rode in the Tour de France, and so that's pretty exciting too. So looking forward to speak with him.
Yes.
Yes, talking about the Valley Preferred Cycling Center, and then I have to switch again. I look like a proper producer, switching from one channel to another, and yep, here we go. So the Valley Preferred Cycling Center, the track in Trexeltown, they, with a lot of areas around us moving from red to yellow, they are opening up their track starting on Monday, if I'm correct, in a limited capacity. So obviously, so they will be opening for their athletes that are racing and have limited availability for others that basically want to make a registration for training sessions, and you can do that via bikerec.com, and it's those are limited time slots. I read this and I was really impressed with the level of detail they put into, okay, what does ready mean for us in that limited capacity. So that's really, really thorough. I'm happy for everybody wanting to get back on the track and doing their laps and getting back out there. So that's I think that's great news, and yeah, the list goes on and on just by highlighting, okay, when is it open? How do we keep everything clean? The locker rooms are closed. This is how you enter and leave, etc., etc. All the details are there. But I think that's great news for the track and everybody involved with the track, as a rider, but also as a coach and people involved with the Valley Preferred Cycling Center.
Yeah. Yeah, I've also been involved with putting on a USA Cycling race, and they sent out an email to all the promoters saying that they were going to lower the fees that they charge for holding an event. So they're really trying to encourage promoters to still continue to hold their races and giving them incentives.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah. It's I think the next couple of weeks will show more about how things evolve with with COVID. So fingers crossed that we keep on being able to contain it compared to the numbers increasing again. So fingers crossed that won't happen. So you had a couple of more, let's say, technical items looking at the group sets and DI2 and
So I know that we spoke last week about how I had the crash, right? I needed to borrow my derailleur from my road bike to put on the mountain bike because my road bike was set up as one by, so I had it really built for gravel, right? And it's
what is one by, if people don't know what one by is?
One by means that you don't use a front chainring or don't use a front derailleur, and you'll use a single chainring. The chainring profile is meant to hold the chain, so that if you are on technical terrain, your chain doesn't bounce off. I don't know if anyone's experienced that, but if you're on really rough roads, your chain can bounce off. You have to get to the bottom of the hill, and you got to stop and put your chain back on. So I switched over to a one by on my road bike, but it still wasn't the ideal setup for gravel racing. So I purchased a gravel bike and have that set up as one by. So now I'm going back to two by on my road bike. And I found that not only are the gear spacings nice because you have those gradual progressions, but they also introduce something with DI2 called synchronous shifting.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that?
No, not really.
Okay. So what happens is, right now I have one shifter that just controls the rear derailleur and goes up and down. Now that I put the front derailleur back on there, you can synchronize it so that as you make the shifts harder, let's say you're starting in your 28, your easiest gear, right? Your 28 on the back of the cassette and your small ring. As you go down and you're pedaling faster and faster, at some point the front derailleur will move to the big ring, and then the rear derailleur will jump up 2 gears.
Okay.
So it's like a continuous, instead of having to manipulate the front derailleur in the back and figure out what gearing you're in, it does that for you automatically. You just say harder gear, it will shift everything for you. So it really takes the thought out of it.
Okay.
So it almost acts like a one by because you don't have to mess with the front derailleur. It does it automatically for you.
Right. And I was looking at the link that you sent. Is that where you would like to start with the gear calculator? Is that?
Yeah, if you can pull that up.
Yeah. I didn't have that link prepared, and it's not bringing me to the correct. I see gear generator, gear, all kinds of stuff. But it's gear.
Yeah, that's okay. We could just talk through it. So essentially, you're going from, I have an 11 speed rear cassette, and 1 by 11 gives you 11 usable gears, but with big jumps in between them. Now with this 11 by 2, you really, it's not like you have 22 available gears because there's some crossover, but it figures out all of those crossovers for you. So when you just say make it harder, it figures out if it needs to be in the big ring or the little ring.
Right.
And all that can be programmed, but essentially it takes out all the thought process in that. So it's something that I've, there you go. Yeah, that's not the link. Yeah, the link I sent you had a comparison too.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
So it actually had that in the link. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's okay.
I'll make sure to add that link to the. But you had an example of the two and the ratios, etc., etc. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's fine. So it will automatically do that for you, which I'd read about it. And I didn't think that I would ever use it, but now that I've gone back to 2 by, I think going from 1 by back to 2 by, now I see the advantage to it. and everyone that I talk to that uses it just says, "Oh, it's a game changer," you know. And even watching Lawrence 10 Down, he got that gravel bike,
Right.
and it has the Shimano GRX, and it comes as a 1 by. And he purposely switched it back to 2 by. He got different cranks and added the front derailleur to it so that he could run that setup. And now I see the advantage, you know, the power that it gives you by giving you way more options.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. The so when I so for the people that don't know, just looking at the amount of different group sets there are, right? So group set usually is the crank, the handles, the derailleurs, the brakes, whether it's disc brakes or rim brakes. Sometimes it comes with the bracket, and but you have the SRAM. This side even has the Campagnolo, which is, I don't know, more and more becoming, I don't know, exclusive, or it's not that well known. As SRAM and Shimano are basically the two biggest. So if you want to, people that want to have a little bit more exclusive, sometimes pick Campagnolo, which is an Italian brand, and then you have the Shimano groups, whether it's the mechanical or you have your DI2, which is electronic shifting, and that's so there are many choices there. And this is only a small, because you have that for road bikes, you have that for gravel bikes, you have that for mountain bikes, obviously. So everybody has their own range of different group sets, and if you then switch to Shimano, this is basically from the bottom up to the top, also looking at how expensive they are, right? So the Claris is the super entry level, and then you go to Sora, Tiagra, 105, Ultegra, and then the top of the line is Durace. If you look at quality or between the different groups, what's your take on the difference? For example, starting at the 105 compared with Ultegra and Durace, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think the 105 is fine for probably, 90% of people, right? The 105 is very capable for a mechanical version.
Right.
If you want to, everyone says once 105 has DI2, that's going to be the end, right? Because it's like, it's going to be affordable and it's electronic, so it's the perfect shifting, right? When you go into Ultegra, now you're introducing DI2, so then you have the electronic shifting, which really minimizes all of your maintenance. All you're doing is replacing your chain at that point.
Right.
There's no, if you have disc brakes and DI2, you really just need to replace your chain and brake pads. So once you get into Ultegra, I bet the majority of people are fine with Ultegra. There's no need to step up to the Durace. And then for the people that are just, they need to have the ultimate, right? It's the Durace. And the price jump from Ultegra to Durace is very steep. It's not double. It's more than double the price for minimal, very minimal gains.
It's mainly the weight, right? It's metal versus carbon components, and because I think especially when the Shimano Ultegra, the R8000 or 8020 came out, that's such a high quality already. Even with rim brakes, they are superb, and then disc brakes, it's just again another level. And like you said, it's a very, very steep, let's say, increase investment wise if you want to go to G-Race. And I would argue even the 105 is you can race competitively with a 105 group. Because what they do is that the G-Race of the 1 year, all that technology goes into the Ultegra after 1 or 2 years, except for the material, but the technology kind of it trickles down by group. So if you wait 3 or 4 years with a 105, you have basically a 3 or 4 year old G-Race group at your availability for a fraction of the price, and that's at least how I look at it.
And even if you look at the pro teams, like the pro continental teams in the U.S., a lot of them are running Ultegra, or even a mix of Ultegra and 105, because you gotta build up 12 bikes for 12 pros. Why spend all that extra money for the Dura-Ace when you're really just looking for to use it for a season, right? Doesn't make sense. Once you get up to the Tour de France level, then of course you're going to want every ounce, right? So you're going to step up to the Dura-Ace.
Right.
But
yeah, and that's also an interesting topic. If you look at, and I took a note of it, there's another, let's say, overview where they compare the different group sets and the weight, and the most lightweight group is the Dura-Ace mechanical. I think that's 2,000 grams, 2,007 grams. If you add Di2 and disc, you're looking at 2,300 grams. So it's not it's not a big difference. The Ultegra mechanical is 2,200 grams. So even the weight difference compared to the price difference is really not there. It used to be more, but it's you're talking about 200 grams, right? If you, I don't know, eat 2 Cliff Bars more, right? Or drink an extra, let's say, water bottle, you probably already gained that 200 grams anyway. So it's I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but I don't know. I always need to put things in perspective.
That's interesting though, that the most expensive Dura-Ace is still heavier than the lightest Ultegra, which would be the mechanical, right?
Yep.
Was it 100?
Yeah,
Yeah,
100
100
grams.
grams.
100 grams. Yeah. Yeah, and we spoke about it because I was chatting earlier this week, and somebody was actually talking about going back from DI to mechanical because experiencing some issues, and when you run into problem, it's basically a ticket back to the bike shop, and that made him decide to go back to mechanical compared to electronic, which is the DI2. And you don't share that experience, right?
No. I feel like it's once you go electronic, you don't go back. I have some older bikes that are still mechanical, but I ride the Di2 bikes almost predominantly. Only if they're in the shop for some reason, then I'll ride the other ones. But I really love the way, I have a mountain bike, on my cross bike, and on my road bike. So it's for me, it's a game changer.
Yeah, and it's reliable for you. Yeah, obviously you need to pay attention and make sure that the battery is charged, right?
Yeah.
And that you don't run out or don't crash and then break something something else.
Yeah.
But, it's a
But
something.
even
Please go ahead.
I was going to say, even the batteries, I mean, you only have to charge them maybe twice a year.
Yeah.
So you get about 6 months out of the charge.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's not too bad. Not bad at all, actually. I thought it was more frequent. Maybe there's also a difference there because you are in the higher end compared. I don't know. There's not a big difference because Di2 is only available for Ultegra and Durace, right?
Durace, right.
105 doesn't have the Di2. So was this more of the same if you look at Synchro Shift?
Yeah, that just explains like what is needed for the synchro shifting and how it works. But I would recommend anyone that has Di2 that's not using synchro shifting to give it a try, because it is a really neat feature. And if you're already investing in the electronic group, then I think it makes sense to turn this feature on and let it really solve all these issues for you, so you don't have to think about which gear you need to be in.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you, because I know that, and I actually have another question. Let's do first the other question that I have in my mind before I forget that one. One other thing, if you look at shifting derailleur, is ceramic. Have you ever looked into ceramic speed, or is that even, let's say, for you, a bridge too far currently?
No, I have the ceramic bottom bracket and pulley wheels on, I think, all the bikes. You see the demos where they spin it and it just keeps going on.
Keeps it going. Yeah.
It's like this looks like free watts right there, so I have to do it. What's amazing is how durable they are. They do get contaminated. Like I've done some muddy mountain bike races and cross races, and you come home and they're like, they just barely spin.
Yeah.
But I have a jewelry cleaner. It's a what do they call that? It's like electrosonic.
Yeah.
So you put it in this water, and I put like some Submarine in there, and then it atomizes all the dirt out of it. It like shakes it out of there.
Yeah.
And you pull them out, and I just use a compressor, blow all the stuff out of it, and they're spin perfect as new, which is amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I next time when you have a, let me know. I'll come over and watch. I'm curious to see how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. It's heated too. I got it on eBay, and they're not expensive.
Okay.
But it heats the solution and then sonicates everything out of it. It's great for chains and cassettes.
Yeah.
Like you just throw a dirty chain in there, come back in 30 minutes, and comes out looking pristine.
It's like throwing something dirty in a glass of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I was actually thinking is that, so what if I had all these advantages that you have? Maybe I could keep up with you, right? It's all these marginal gains.
I had all that ceramic.
Yeah, exactly. It's you do mechanical doping.
Yeah.
So let me go back to the other screen. So my question here is, because I saw the interface. Do you have your let's say shifters or your gears integrated with your bike computer, or do you basically collect that data?
It collects it. You can also see it on the screen, and it can read the power on your battery. Right, it tells you how much power you have left in your Di2 battery. All through Bluetooth. Yeah. You can use your phone and change the shifting patterns on there.
Okay.
So the advantage of having the synchro shifters is now my left shifter performs the exact same as my right. Typically, your left shifter is only for the front derailleur, so you use it like how many times you ride? 10 times a ride, maybe. And then the right shifter you're using all the time.
Okay.
Now they're redundant. So you can use your left. Like let's say you're taking a bottle, right? You're drinking, you're at the top of a hill, you need to go harder. You can use your left shifter to shift your rear derailleur.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat. Now you only need to, I don't know, the brakes. So one time when I traveled to the UK, to London. I rented a bike there, and luckily the guy told me, and it was even with disc brakes, the front and the rear brake are the other way around.
Switch. Yeah.
So otherwise, I might have been in a severe crash, because you don't expect. So that has to do with, because they drive at the other side of the road, obviously. So that's why they have it turned around. That was interesting.
Yeah, motor riders will do that too, because motorcycle, it's the opposite. The right is your front brake, right? Because you have your I'm sorry, the left.
Left.
The left is your rear brake, front brake, sorry. Right?
No, the left is the clutch.
Left is the clutch.
Yeah.
Right is the front brake.
Yeah, and the foot brake.
And on a bicycle, right is the rear brake.
Yep.
So motor riders will switch theirs up too. So their brain doesn't have to think
Exactly.
when they go down
Okay,
mountain
that's
bikes.
interesting. Yeah, I rode motor for a while, and I never really thought about that. So, but that's because I also rode a moped and a bike. So probably my brain doesn't know any better. But if you're a motor rider getting into cycling and you never rode a bicycle before, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you did have something else also, bike rumors on the gravel bike and GRX components. Do you want to dive into that a bit?
That was there was a question and answer with the Shimano rep, and they went into a deep dive, question and answers about gravel groups, and a lot of it was about cross compatibility, because when gravel came out, people were doing what I did. We took a road bike and you tried to make it work, tried to put as thick tires as you could on it.
Yeah.
Tried to get it so that the chain didn't drop. I don't know how many races I did where I got to the bottom, my chain was off, and I had to stop and put it back on and catch back up. So things like clutch derailleurs would work on a mountain bike, but not on a road bike. So you couldn't use like Ultegra shifters and a mountain bike derailleur, because the pull was different.
Right.
And still the case today, right?
Yep.
The only way they could get this to work was to use Di2, because Di2 doesn't care if you're using road shifters or a mountain bike derailleur, and then you can have the clutch on there as well. So that was all fine and dandy until they came out with 12-speed XTR, and they haven't put Di2 onto 12-speed, and the SRAM has 12-speed road and mountain bike.
Okay.
And it's all interchangeable, and it's wireless, right? So you just plug in a little battery into the back. Don't have to pull wires, tubes, anything like that. So a lot of the questions were about like when is this going to be cross-compatible?
Right.
And the general consensus is don't worry, something's in the works, something's coming. So there's been talk about having a wireless module that you plug into your existing Di2, and then have something you plug into your rear derailleur, and it makes it completely wireless. So what's nice is that'll be backwards compatible, right? And it'll work with any of your existing systems. And then eventually maybe allow it to work with 12-speed also, because Di2 is not, it's not set up like a mechanical where the pull ratio is defined by the geometry of the rear derailleur, right? Di2 could make smaller steps. So it could be, you could make a Di2 rear derailleur 8-speed, 9-speed, 11-speed, 12-speed, whatever, just by adjusting it, right? So it's not based on any mechanics in it. There's a hint throughout the whole thing about Di2 dropper posts,
Oh, really?
all this cross all this cross compatibility. So it'll be interesting. I think this will be the year that Shimano comes back fighting against SRAM, because it feels like they're up against the ropes. SRAM's really been fighting them on pricing,
innovative,
and compatibility.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. It's and we spoke about it before. Is that I do believe that bike innovation and technology the last couple of years really has taken off, and it basically started for me in my mind with the disc brakes and the adoption of disc brakes, and then that kind of got the competitiveness back into these Shimano, SRAM, Campagnolo to certain extent, because in my mind it was kind of stagnant for quite a while, and then with the carbon disc brakes, carbon wheels, kind of took off the last couple of years, and this is again yet another good example with gravel and gravel bikes and a specific gravel group set, and is it interchangeable, yes or no? So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
And even the through axles, for mountain biking, the through axle has been huge because you have two triangles on either side of the frame, and by putting that bolt through it, you are really solidifying that rear end of the bike. On the road, it's not, because you don't have all the linkages, it's not as noticeable, but you really are allowing further frame designs because you are creating a tighter triangle by having that bolt hold it together. So you do see, if you look at Specialized bikes, they have these dropped seat stays, right? They're able to tuck everything down, make it more aero, allow for wider tires while still having that stiffness. Because you're not using a little flimsy lever, like a quick release to keep everything together. Now you have a bolt. So it'll be interesting to see in the next few years how everything evolves because of all this technology.
Right. Yeah. And that makes me think about, you spoke about wider tires. Right. For the longest time, you rode 23 mil tires because those were the fastest tires. And you put a crazy amount of pressure in it. And now recently, or a couple of years back, it's 25 mil, and now more and more, even for the road, they're looking at 28 even. And the speed difference, or the friction, basically, there's not a big difference between 25 and 28, but the level of comfort is very different, especially when you have a rough road surface, cobblestones, what have you. That is a big difference, because you can run less tire pressure, have a more comfortable ride, and that being more comfortable then translates into a higher speed, because you can it absorbs the road much better. So those I find that immensely interesting to learn about that.
And going back to like Rich Drew said on the podcast about how the Cush core, which is the liner that goes into your tubeless mountain bike tire. I heard the trainer guys, they're doing the Cape Epic. So they signed up 3 teams of two-person teams, and the guy was saying how rough the roads are over there, and how the course is really going to eat through tires. So everyone needs to run these Cush core, and they have a new ultralight cross-country version. And he was saying that he could go from 22 pounds of pressure in his mountain bike tires down to 11.
That's
which is just nuts.
That's nuts. That's like, I couldn't even think about that. And it's it's tubeless, obviously, right? So Cush core and tubeless. So. That's also very interesting develop. I never heard of it, so I looked into it when Rich spoke about that in our podcast, and it looked really interesting. I've used the, let's say, inlays in your. You would basically stick it to the inside of your tire, of your, let's say, outer tire. And it was a very thin Kevlar layer for puncture,
Right.
extra puncture protection, and it did work. And I used that on my TT bike for triathlons, and then that worked out perfectly. I never had a puncture with that bike, so maybe it was lucky. I never had to test it, but yeah, and that's one of the things that, talking about tires, Lawrence Dendam talks about with the guy that works at Shimano, who's a former pro mountain biker. They talk about tubeless, and his prediction is, the guy that works at Shimano, is that tubular tires will go away, because tubeless is just as good and less cumbersome. Still cumbersome, right? When you get a real flat with tubeless, it's messy. Let me put it like that. But it's getting better and better. Yeah.
Do you have tubeless on your road bike?
I have a wheel set with tubeless. Yeah, and it saves me once or twice. Yeah, absolutely. With a small puncture, you hear it hiss a little bit, like, and then it fills, and you lose a little bit pressure, but you're able to proceed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I have it on my cross bike, my mountain bike, and my road bike. And on the road, I run about 60 psi.
Yeah.
But on the cross bike, I'll run 40. On road tires. So and then during the race, you drop it down to like 25 or so.
Yeah. I'm a little higher, but that has more to do with weight than. I beat myself once with a cyclocross race where I swapped my wheels. Still don't know why. So I actually had my inner, how do you call it?
Inner tubes?
Inner tubes with, and I had in the Netherlands you call it a snake bite, where you basically bump into something and you have two small punctures, and that was basically the end of my race. It was one lap before finish, and I didn't bother to run the whole lap with my bike in my hand, so because it was the last lap, so that was never do that again.
That's interesting though about the tubulars, because one of the big selling points was you couldn't get pinch flats with them, right? You couldn't get the snake bites. But then also, if you got a flat, you could still ride safely on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the Tour de France would have a flat and ride the last, whatever miles on their flat tubular, and it was still safe. Clincher, you can't do that. Tubeless, you can't do that. Tubeless would be just dangerous, right? So it'll be interesting to see if all the tour riders switch to tubeless and what happens in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. That might take a while for them to really make that change. To your point, so that's and I've heard that more than once, where on a descent they got a flat, and they were still able to maneuver and brake and get out of the way with doing 50 or 60 miles an hour on the downhill. So that's could be a lifesaver. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I think we are pretty much done. Do you have any other topics you'd like to talk about? Still nothing on Chris Froome. Still with Ineos.
Yeah. There's Lance Armstrong, part two, right? But I don't know how much.
Yeah, I don't know. I still haven't made up my mind what to think of that documentary. I still hoped there would be more.
Yes.
Because there is so much more to talk about. Right, the when he came back for the second time, which was probably his biggest mistake of his life, right?
Absolutely.
Right, so that's highlighted. I think we already knew that, but I think we spoke about that even. But did he do any doping then? Right? He says in other interviews he didn't. Everybody around him and still says, yeah, there's really no way that that he did.
How can you get third coming back and not dope?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought that was interesting though that the race organizer even called him and said, "Don't come back." Right? Other teams had called him and said, "Don't come back." Like, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Exactly. Yeah.
He really admitted that part. Yeah.
So he somewhat shot himself in the foot with that. So that was interesting, and I don't know, at the very end, him talking about Ulrich and getting emotional, and then him getting basically even more emotional, but more about the fact that, hey, you're singling out the one person, and you're not, all the others are getting a, I don't know, a get out of jail card, and I think he was much more angry about that. Although he had a very special relationship with Ulrich, which was special, right? But he was obviously very, very emotional, very angry and frustrated about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any big rides planned for the weekend?
Trying to go big on Sunday, so we'll see if the weather cooperates. But yeah, that's about it. How about yourself?
Yeah, that Sunday a longer ride. Planning to do 4 hours on the road. And
Nice.
tomorrow morning I do a race on Swift with the DDC team. It's they got some a nice, let's say, incentive on a not a trainer road, a Training Peaks. I think 1 or 2 months free subscription for the winners of that. It's a month by month, let's say, race league, so you can do four races, and there is an individual and there is a team component. So we're racing as a DDC team, so that's nice to go hard, and it's a 45 minute race, so that's nice. And then spin out the legs on Sunday.
Yeah, good. Sounds good.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
We'll
Thanks,
talk
Gerry.
again soon, and we'll see everybody on next Friday.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye bye.